Okay, we got the thumbs up from Moody. My name is Jennifer Schmidt. I do tracks development for the state of Wisconsin. This session is IT best practices. And today we'll be talking about, oh, let me just get this going here. Sorry. There we go. Okay, so we're going to spend some time talking about the new fall release. First of all, how many of you were among the 38 agencies that already began their update to the fall release? Okay, I apologize for the bumpy ride. We're going to get it smoothed out very shortly. You should have gotten a notice yesterday morning that has 2 files that need to be installed on your transmission machines. There's a problem right now where essentially the municipality code on the citation is getting corrupted, and if you slide in the new style sheets, that's going to correct your problem. Right now, you're on the court side at CCAP, they're going to have some issues getting that data into their system. And so the sooner you get this patch applied, the happier you're going to be. And again, my apologies for that error. We are going to be re-releasing the update in a few days, perhaps up to a week. We're going to start with State Patrol, get them updated first, have them validate that everything is working well, and then restart the rollout again. So this slide is already out of date. We are now, we'll be releasing baseline 1727. That specifically has some fixes for web services that were encountered with State Patrol. The new pack number is going to be 1710 something, probably whatever tomorrow's date is. The new map files, those are stable, and they have a number of 170907. This pack that's coming out will require agencies to run Delta scripts if you're a SQL Server agency, so don't overlook that step. We have a new form and new fields on existing forms, and that requires a new Delta script. We have new import and export instructions for the citations, the crash form, and the new pursuit form. It's critical that you get those in place. Similarly, there's new communication instructions that need to be installed. We have some optional items for you to consider. On the driver exchange form on the crash, there's an area reserved for the local agencies to include a message of some sort on the driver exchange form. This is typically used to explain how to get a copy of your own crash form from the agency, although it's free text field, so you can put whatever message you'd like to put in there. We have some changes to GPS that can be quite helpful if you use GPS at your agency, GPS devices, I should say. We have a new access level that addresses a very specific problem where if your agency has a situation where your officers cannot, as a general rule, view each other's forms, but they're often working on the same case together. So you have Jane writing up the crash report and Joe writing up the citations. It's all under the same police case number, and when it gets transmitted back to your office, suddenly Joe can't look at his own forms because Jane's crash form got there first, and so Jane owns the case, and Joe can't look at any forms in the case owned by Jane. We have a fix for that issue. Show of hands, how many are impacted by that at your agency? Okay, at least one. So we'll definitely cover it. If you already allow your reporters, your officers to view each other's forms, this fix does not apply to you because they can already do what they need to do. This fall pack will require you to do a distribution because of the configuration changes that you need. Okay. just go real quickly. This update does include an update to the baseline Trax engine, and some of the settings will be updated or created by the baseline install of the Trax engine. But none of those settings are settings that you would normally fiddle with anyhow, so that's not going to break any of the settings that you've previously configured. Similarly, our WI pack is going to update some state level settings, update your forms, update your analysis reports, add a few buttons here and there on the menu bars, update some template files, update some access levels, code tables, and map files. But again, that's all in its own separate column, not going to impact any configuration customization that you've done for your agency. And then, of course, you will be doing a distribution to put some of the settings in, update some user accounts, communications, and the code tables. And so, again, just to emphasize, nothing's going to overlap. Your settings and your code tables are protected. So everything nestles in together just right, with nobody being rude or pushy or anything like that. Okay. Number one take-home message of the conference is, when you get the fall release, be sure to follow the instructions that come with it. This is an approximately 15-page document. Don't worry that it's 15 pages. It's mostly screenshots. In the session earlier today, I talked to somebody and they said it took them about 20 minutes to get it done. I'm going to round that up to an hour, just so that it covers your bases if things get slowed down for whatever reason. But if you allow an hour to do the fall update, you'll be more than covered. Okay, and then this is what happens typically. These are the screenshots you see when you go through the update process. I think all of you have been through the update process before, so these should not be shocking to you. Again, reminder, if you're a SQL Server agency, there will be some table updates that need to be made. The update process generates what we call the Delta scripts. So there'll be some alter table statements to run and some create table statements to run. Excuse me, I don't have a strong voice, and at the end of the day, you get the worst of it. So run your Delta scripts, update the transmission configuration for the pursuit form, the LC form, DNR form, NDC form, crash form. And that means updating your import-export instructions. So you go into the import-export configuration in the Configuration Manager. Select export instructions, import from template, no let me choose. I will say at this point, sometimes agencies will pick a different radio button here, maybe the first one or the second one. That's bad news for you, don't do that. Instead, pick the last radio button, no let me choose. That will allow you to specifically select the instructions that need to update. Okay, and when you're done, what you should notice is that for your citations, you've got some new instructions that end in 2017, okay? If it just says XML to YGIS without the 2017, you're not done, you didn't do it right. So check that out. Notice that we have a new version of the crash form this year, Crash V4. Last year you put in Crash V3. After getting feedback over the year, from the users, we came to understand that we needed to kind of restructure the form a little bit. Some of you have been annoyed with the vehicle owner information sometimes disappearing when it should not. That was because we had moved the vehicle owner information out into a separate group, and that caused a conflict with how we manage the common information for the vehicle. So the vehicle owner information is going back into the vehicle group, and that should end that conflict and the disappearing vehicle owner data. And then we have the new pursuit form, so that makes sense that we would have to have a new communications or import-export instruction for the pursuit form. And then after you get the import-export instructions done, well, you got to do the communications instructions as well. So you go into the communications editor, similar work, import from template, no let me choose, and then you've got your new communications instructions. I do give you a tip. Another agency reported a problem after they went through the upgrade with the RMS export for the crash form. I'm pretty sure what happened was, so we've got a new version of the crash form. So for the export instructions for the RMS, you got to import from template to get a new export instruction for your RMS for the new version of the form. And that's in the additional instructions. And then when you do that import, it's going to be set up sort of as the default vanilla flavor of that, which may not be specifically what your RMS is looking for as far as formatting of data or whether there's a PDF associated with it and all that stuff. So what you'll want to do is go back and look how your Crash v3 form is set up for export to the RMS, and then go through and make sure the Crash v4 version is set up the same way. And then you should be in good shape. If you have trouble interpreting those settings, or some of the settings are buried a little deep, you actually have to click a few buttons to get to them. If you have any concerns about that, give us a call. We'll help you navigate all that. So now on to the access level change. So this problem where you can't see your own form because somebody else owns the case is solved by a new access level called View Only Cases. And what this allows you to do, so in that example where Jane owns the case and Joe has some forms in that case, if we give Joe access to view the case that Jane has, then he's going to be able to get access to his own forms. He won't be able to view or edit Jane's form in the case, but he'll be able to edit and view his own form in the case. If you don't have a problem with this right now, don't do this. This is only for agencies that are struggling because they can't view each other's cases. It's not needed if the reporters are already allowed to view each other's forms. Okay. So to set this up, you will have to go and edit each user in your agency. What you're going to do is you'll bring up each user, and then in the lower right-hand corner, turn on my laser pointer here, you've got an add button, okay? And that's going to set up your user association for this user. So we're going to say, so if this is Joe's account, we're going to say which users can Joe see their cases. So we'll click the add, and what we're going to do, and I blew through a couple of intervening screenshots, is we're going to, in associated users, assign the all group because we want Joe to be able to see all the cases, not just some of the cases. And then we're going to add the access right of view-only cases, okay? And again, this is spelled out in the additional instructions. Some of you, especially if you were one of the earlier adopters of TRACS, may not have an all group. If that's the case, if you bring up a new version or the current version of the installation guide and you go to the task in Chapter 3 that covers creating user groups, it will show you how to add the all group. And if you don't want to fiddle around with trying to figure that out, you could also just give us a call and we'll walk you through the process. Okay, so that's how you do it if you use TRACS to manage your users. What if you use Active Directory to manage your users and you want to accomplish the same thing? In that case, in Active Directory, you're going to create two new groups. One's called TRACS Access Level View Only Cases, and the other one's called TRACS AU group name, view-only cases. And in that group name, typically it's going to be the all group because you want to give them access across the agency. But depending on how you manage security, you might have things subsetted out. And so I have some other examples there. Troop 1, Boat Patrol. And then the way I like to think of this is what you're going to do is for the access level view-only cases, you're going to give that to, in my example, Joel. Okay, so think of that as he's getting that access level. And then in the TRACS AU all, that's the equivalent of adding it in the associated users. So you would put the associated users into that group. Okay, is that sort of clear? Again, the special instructions explain that again as well, so you don't worry that you have to just pick this up right from this presentation. Okay, and then we have new custom text for you to remind you how to do that. What you're going to do is in TRACS proper, you're going to go in and log in with your administrative account, and you're going to go to the table manager menu under Tools, and you're going to see there's an item in there called Custom Text, and you're going to click Update, and when you're in that panel, you're going to select Crash Agency Instructions as the custom text that you want to add, and then there's sort of like a mini word processor that you use to create your custom text. And this message then will appear on the driver exchange form. How many of you, your agency uses the driver exchange form? I know not everybody does. Okay, a few. So this is something, and do you sell crash reports at your agency, or you have special instructions that you want people to know about how to get their own report? Okay, so you might want to put a note in there that says that. And so now you can do that. Okay, and again, for the people who have been through the maintaining TRACS session or the TRACS admin session yesterday, some of this is going to feel a little repetitive, and I apologize for that. But I'll try to get through this as quickly as I can. So like I said, because you're doing so many configuration changes, you are going to want to create a new distribution. That'll include exporting users, updating the configuration wizard for GPS if your agency uses GPS. Speaking of GPS, there is now support for UDP devices. I know Motorola has a modem that serves out GPS data on UDP. Cradlepoint modems likewise. So this was really designed for that. This is a new feature. We didn't have the equipment in-house for us to test it here, so we were relying on our vendor to, they said it works, so we believe them. If you have any problems getting the UDP modem set up to get the GPS data off of UDP, let us know. If necessary, we will have the vendor work with you to get that working again, because this is a new feature in TRACS, and we want to make sure we got what we paid for on that. All right, the other features we have is now TRACS is able to auto-detect your GPS devices. So if you have this situation where officers are plugging in GPS devices in different ports on different days, and you always had that headache of resetting their port number, auto-detect would be something that could help you out with that. You can have it auto-detect either when TRACS starts up, which is, I think probably the best way to do it, or when the device is plugged in, or in both situations. And so this is a little excerpt from the configuration or the distribution process. So this is, when you click the distribution button, it brings up the configuration wizard. This is the GPS section. It looks a little bit different. We added another field, and I think we kind of moved where they are on the form a little bit. So the first field I want to talk about is this GPS source field. Let me try clicking in the right place. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we have a new choice in here. We have the UDP port. So if you're setting up a UDP device, that's what you select. It's really literally as easy as that. and then you'll have to put in the port number 21,000 or whatever it happens to be. And for that, you have to contact the manufacturer of the device, read their documentations to figure that out. So I want to give you a little bit of a hint. If your agency is in the habit of excluding settings from the distribution, including, or like the GPS settings specifically, you want to make sure that you don't exclude the GPS source. Even if you have some computers that don't run GPS, because the serial port, if you choose serial port in the distribution, more than just switching it over to serial port is being specified. It's actually turning off the interface to MOC, because if you use MOC, you want to choose MOC here, regardless of whether it's a USB device or whatever. You want your GPS coordinates to be coming from MOC, because TRAX won't allow it any other way if you're running both pieces of software. And what that means is then is if you're not running MOC, we need to turn off the MOC interface. And the way we do that is by choosing serial port on this menu. And that will do two things. It will set it up for a serial port if there's a GPS available. And it will shut down the MOC interface because you're not using it anyhow because you're not a MOC agency. So that's a little gotcha there, something to be aware of. Just make sure the GPS source field is blue when you're doing the distribution. Then you know you've done it right. And then we also have disabled on there. Honestly, disabled and MOC kind of work the same. Basically, if there is GPS data to be served from MOC, it'll come in. All right. Next slide. Okay, and then the other new feature here is our GPS auto detect. And let's try that, that's better. Okay, so, and again, this is just a simple drop-down box. You choose when TRAX starts, when the USB device plugs in. And if you want to do it both on both occasions, you just go ahead and you select both check boxes. You can also choose never if you don't care about that. And I would say if you have GPS in your squad cars and it's working fine and nobody's giving you any hassles about GPS, just set it to never, because the way things are working are fine. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it, you know. But if people complain about that, you know, that the port's never right, you can try putting the auto detect on and see if that improves the situation for you. Okay, and then again, this is where it gets a little repetitive between yesterday and the maintenance session. So the next step after completing the special instructions is to create a distribution. Anybody in this room feel shaky about doing distributions? Okay. So I'll run through this pretty quickly. So you'll go ahead and click the button for Create Distribution. You'll be asked for your 3-digit TRAX agency number. You know, to be honest with you, you can put any text in here at all. So if you want to separate out your mobile versus your office distribution, you can put in your agency number dash mobile or dash office or whatever, however you want to distinguish. You just want something that's going to be different than if you have other saved configuration wizards in here, so that it's identified to you that you're using it for distribution. You could even type in the word distribution if that was your preference. And then the distribution wizard comes up and you can see we've got the blue fields. Just a reminder, the blue fields are the fields that are going to get bundled up into your distribution and put out on the field unit. Any fields in white are not included in the distribution. If for some reason there's some blue fields that you wish weren't going into the distribution, you just come up into the exclusion area here and select the settings off the drop-down list that you want to exclude from the distribution, and those won't go in. And then you go through the normal steps of creating a distribution, which means filling out, you know, this panel up here, and then validating, which will check your form for common errors, and then go ahead and bundle up your files and make the distribution for you. Okay, troubleshooting. If for whatever reason you either skip all of the special instructions, because maybe you weren't on our listserv and didn't even know that there were special instructions with this pack, or if you just kind of skipped over a couple of steps because a coworker interrupted you on something and you lost your place. When you start up TRAX on a workstation, you will see some error messages relating to mostly the communications instructions, the import-export instructions, that you may have missed some of those, or that you did not update your SQL Server database. It looks for you know, some fields in the pursuit form as proof that you went in and ran your Delta scripts. So if that's going on, you want to take a look at that error message and try to figure out which step you missed in the special instructions. Go ahead and redo those steps, and then if you need to, make another distribution. For this release, we do not have any extra error messages on the field units. So even if you do skip some steps, at least your officers won't be aware of them, just the people inside the headquarters. Okay. Come 1/16/2018, CCAP, the courts will be switching over to an updated citation schema. And so we actually have the programming in place ahead of time. And when that date flips over, the next time they transmit, it will come out over the new schema. Just to make you aware of the changes in the data that we're sending, CCAP has requested that we start sending them a PDF of the court version of this, the court copy of the citation. And so we're doing that. The DL number is automatically redacted from that. We're also now sending the telephone number that was from one of the Muni Court vendors requested that we start sending the telephone number, and so we'll be doing that on January 16, 2018. We've relaxed the restrictions on the plate type and vehicle make fields, and this is so that we don't have to wait for a schema update just to get in a new plate type or a new vehicle make. I think it's been about 5 years since the schema's been updated, and in that time you've had to, you know, deal with the fact that we're missing certain makes, we're missing certain plate types. Now we'll be able to be much more responsive to updates to the plate type table and the vehicle make table. So hopefully that will give you some relief on those issues. The CMV waiver list on the traffic citation now has 2 more entries on it. One is law enforcement, the other is fire rescue. If you select those codes now, you can actually do that. But if you transmit that citation today, that field's going to be blank because those codes aren't valid until 2018. But that's coming. I don't think that those values are used very often, but they're in there now. This schema update paves the way for allowing 4-digit machine IDs. No higher than 2499. So you can't go up to 9999. If you do that, you're going to wind up overlapping other people's citation numbers, like from other agencies, or form numbers from other agencies, and that's going to cause a huge headache. So only up to 2499. And if you want to transmit that citation, you got to wait for those kind of changes until after 1/16/2018, because that unit number, the machine ID number, will not transmit correctly on the citation until we're on the new schema. Okay, I believe that's everything on the fall release. Yes, it is. Any questions about the fall release? Yes, sir. Can you say the last part again? Oh, with the COM splitter. Yeah, we all hate that COM splitter, don't we? No, it should not. We don't. I believe we updated the COM splitter about a year ago. So if it's been a really long time since you've updated the COM splitter, there is a slightly newer version in the trax10.zip file on our extranet site. But if you had the one that we updated last year, it's no better or worse than it was. It's the auto detect. All it really does is it scans the existing ports looking for GPS data, and if it finds a port that provides GPS data, it's going to grab that. So that introduces an interesting question, which is, well, what if I have another piece of software on there that is absolutely positively must be on port 3, and you start the TRAX software first, and it goes through and does its scan and grabs port 3 instead of port 4. Now I've been rude to the other software, and that software is not going to be able to handle that. So that would be a reason for not turning on the auto detect. So, and again, this is a new feature, so you may find that it's not behaving exactly the way you like or as intended. If you find that's the case, send us a note and we'll work with the vendor to see what we can do to improve how that functionality works.
We split one incoming signal between Mach and TRAX right now.
Mm-hmm.
But then on that source, we have Mach.
Yeah.
We can pull that GPS
Yeah,
data.
absolutely, absolutely, and that should be what you're doing, because that will reduce the number of splits you're doing. I don't know if you're splitting for any other software, but yeah, get rid of the comm splitter and get your GPS signal from Mach, and you will be happier. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, just one more plug for the TRAX as-built documentation. This is a new template that's available for you. It's a Word document. There is in your handout, there's a how's your documentation flyer. We really are encouraging people to take a look at how well they've done a job of documenting their TRAX configuration. If your server exploded today, would you be able to figure out all the customizations that you've put in place over the years? If you had to start from scratch tomorrow, would you have the documentation that you needed to do that? If the answer to that is no, or I don't know, you're going to want to get a copy of this template and take a look at your existing documentation and look at what the template is suggesting that you document. And if there's some holes, fill in those holes. If perhaps your predecessor did not do a great job documenting things and you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants right now, well, this is a great time to take this document and create a brand new set of documentation on your TRAX configuration. Last month was disaster preparedness month, but you can still work on it in October too. No harm in that. I think, as was mentioned earlier today, we had a few agencies this summer who lost their servers. In one case it was a flood. I'm not quite sure on the other cases. We had to help them reconstruct things, and it's always much easier if we have decent documentation to go off of. It is possible to recover data, even if the server is totally destroyed. The last 90 days of data is typically still on your field units, and it is possible to recover data off of the field units and at least build back the last 90 days worth of your TRAX forms. So if you ever find yourself in that situation, let us know, because we have some FAQs on rebuilding your server and what to do when you're trying to recover as much data as possible, because perhaps your backups failed. So do get in touch with us. At the very least, we can tell you how sorry we are that you are going through that. But we can actually give you some really useful advice as well. Okay, and this just is a screenshot from the documentation kit. There are steps that are outlined in green italics. The concept is you do what the green stuff says, and then after you've pasted in the information, you delete the instructions, so at the end you have a nice clean document with everything organized for you. And they'll give you steps to do, like record the TRAX or the Windows computer name for the TRAX master computer. It'll have you go out to a command window in Windows, type in host name, boom, there is your Windows computer name, and you paste that into the document. Similarly, it'll have you go into regedit to look at some registry keys and paste some information from there, such as your network installation path. So especially if you're a new administrator and you're just kind of dumped into the job and you're having trouble getting your bearings, filling in one of these out is very educational as well. This is just the tip of the iceberg here. I didn't want to bore you with filling out a form, but it goes out on to have you document your database connections, and on and on and on it goes. Okay, so we've made some changes to transmission. We have improved the handling of failed transmissions. So have you ever had this situation? You transmitted a citation or a crash to the state got it, but your RMS had problems, and so the citation was marked as a failed transmission. You go to transmit it a second time, it still comes back failed. This time it went into your RMS, but you got a duplicate from the state saying, hey buddy, I already got a copy of this, why are you sending this to me again? And then, so now it's in a failed status, but the data has actually arrived at both places, so that at that point, you have to manually change the status to transmitted. If that's a familiar story to you, we have made some improvements to eliminate that scenario. Basically, if you've transmitted it to the state, we put a receipt number or a receipt message in the form itself saying it was received by the state, and then if you transmit a second time, it's going to skip the state transmission and go straight to your RMS, and that should smooth things out quite a bit when you're retransmitting forms to because of a failure to your RMS. We added a button that will allow you to verify whether the state servers are available and you're able to connect to them before you do the transmit. So if you just want that little extra reassurance that everything is A-OK, you can click that button and get some information on your ability to reach those servers. We've also, how many of you in here have ever fiddled around with that retransmit button at all? We've got one over there, two over there. I'll tell you, the numbers on that are a lot higher than I expected, both in this session and the morning session. We renamed that button, so don't get upset because it looks like the button went away. We renamed that button. We also improved how it functions a tiny little bit. I'm still not real happy with the retransmit button, but I think we made it a little bit better for you. Okay, so here is just screenshots from the documents section of both the crash form and the citation form. For the crash form, we actually put a receipt number in the form after it's been received by the state. If for whatever reason the state says we didn't receive this crash, you've got that receipt number. You can say, well, you said you did, here's the receipt number. They should be in their logs to be able to follow through and find out why that failed. It also prevents this form from being sent a second and third time to the state if they already have it. With the citations, we're not quite that sophisticated. Instead of an actual receipt number for that transaction, all you'll see in there is the message successful. Or if there is a failure, it would have, well, if it's a failure, it's going to be blank. So that serves the purposes of blocking it from transmitting to the state a second and third time, and will make the transmission process go smoother for you. Okay, and then here's the button for verify state connectivity. If you click that button, you're going to get a message like this. It's just a simple up-down message, and it's really just saying whether you can reach the server and whether the server responded with an appropriate message. Now, I got to tell you a little quirk about the WIGES workflow that you use for eCitation transmission. The eCitation service, it actually has a two-step process. There's sort of this receiving office up front that's very, very fast, very good at grabbing your citation and kind of throwing it over to the next part. But when eCitation gets backed up because there's a lot of traffic, that second part has a problem, and those citations can stack up, and it might be a couple of hours later that it actually begins to process your citation, depending on how much of a backlog there is. When that scenario is going on, this screen is going to give you a down message. It's not really down, it's just busy, okay? So you could potentially transmit and get the citations over to the WIGES workflow, but there could be a delay then in getting it over to CCAP and DA Protect and all the rest. So I just want you to be clear that for citations, down sometimes means busy. Up always means available and ready to go, and it's going to go through right away. So you might use that down message to like tip you off that maybe if I don't transmit first thing on Monday morning and wait till a little later in the day, that citation is going to move along faster then, and maybe that can help load balance a little bit. Not sure about that. So that's the new State Verify Connectivity button. And then here is our retransmit button, and it is not labeled retransmit. It is now selective transmission, okay? And that is really because when people call the help desk and we tell them to transmit a citation again, sometimes we slip and we tell them to retransmit, because transmit again and retransmit kind of sound like they're saying the same thing. And then on the other end, the customer uses that retransmit button, and then they get this dialogue that is very confusing to them when we really should have just told them to transmit. So we camouflage this button a little bit. So now it's selective transmission, which is a tip-off that you should use it in very rare circumstances. I see over there that you guys have used the button occasionally. Can you give me an example of when you found it useful?
Mainly when we have had to troubleshoot issues like for our citation not getting to our RMS.
Okay.
Instead of like hitting transmit again,
Mm-hmm.
I would do the selective transmission, so that I can then check in my communications folder for the file and verify that it's XML statement there. And then I would run it again and then let it run transcom to see where
Sure. Mm-hmm.
it's lost.
Okay. So for troubleshooting, would be a purpose to use selective transmit so that you can step through the export of the citation to your RMS system and just get that piece of it. So 2 points on that. One is with the way that we've set up transmission to work now, where it's not going to force it to go to the state every single time, you may find that the need to use retransmit has dropped quite a bit. But for those situations where maybe the communications, you've got it set up for FTP, but that's not working, so you're going to deliver the file some other way. So maybe you just want to do the export portion, any of it, anyhow. That might be a reason for using it. Regardless, it's your choice if you choose to use it. I'm going to show you what that looks like in case you've never seen this screen before. So this is what you get when you hit the selective transmit button. One of the changes you're going to notice is that we grayed out all the communication instructions and only left the export instructions visible. Because the reason for that is it was a little funky the way it worked, because you'd check the instructions that you wanted to rerun, and then it would sort of just run it in the order it was in the list, which is not necessarily the order that you really wanted to run it in, because you don't want to transmit the data that you haven't extracted yet. That's the wrong order. So we fixed that by graying out the communications instructions so they're not selectable. You select the exports you want, you hit run. After you're done, you're going to get a message that says, do you want to run Transcom now? And then it'll run the appropriate Transcom instructions for those exports. So I think that'll be a little bit smoother use. It sounds like you were pretty comfortable the way it was. Hopefully this just makes it easier for you. But otherwise, it's the same tool that you know. I don't know if you love it, but you know it. Okay. Okay, and then let me see what we've got for time here. Okay, so we are a little faster than we were this morning, which is good because this topic is a little bit long. So what this next topic is going to be about is occasionally we've got user or agencies who have their own reporting tools. They're not interested in using the ad hoc reporting tool in TRAX. And they just want to use whatever reporting tool they like in their agency. Maybe you've got something set up through SQL Server, maybe you use Crystal Reports. Is there anybody in this room that's in that situation or is interested in knowing more about how your TRAX data is structured? Okay. Well, then, if you're not interested in that, I don't have to, well, I'll go through it just for the sake of the video, but we won't spend a whole lot of time on it. And then other than that, we would have time for technical questions. So if you have any technical questions, you can either raise your hand or you can write them down on the pink slip and hand them forward. And we'll just go through a brief discussion of understanding your data. So your TRACS form data is stored in what we call the data database, which in SQL Server is the TRACS_data database. And in MS Access, that's called data.mdb. The code tables that go into the drop-down lists that people select from, those are in the TRACS support database, TRACS_support or support MDB. And so those are really the two databases that hold your TRACS data or populate your TRACS data. We do provide data dictionaries for all of our forms. They're in the integration cd.zip file. And if you get that, that's available off of our extranet. If you get that file and unzip it and then go to the records management system export folder, and then for each form then we have a separate folder. So here I'm in the NTC folder. And then you can see we have a PDF file called NTC V2 field list. And the keywords there is field list PDF. If you open that up, that's going to provide a data dictionary outlining the names of all the fields and all the groups and the code tables associated with those forms. So that's an excellent resource if you're going to write your own reports outside of TRACS. Okay, and so this, somebody sent us a note saying, can you provide us with an entity relationship diagram, an ER diagram for the TRACS database? And no, that's not a resource that we have. I did cobble up something that's kind of like that for the purposes of this presentation. And so all of the tables I'm referencing here are in the TRACS data database. The first one I want to talk about is the folder info table. This has your case level information. So you've got maybe a crash and 3 citations all on the same incident. That's one case, one record in the folder info table. And that has a primary key of folder key. And the way to understand what kind of data is in the folder info table is if you bring up the case information screen for the case, the data you see there is the data that's in the table. That links up to the prod header table, which is, if you think of the forms grid and the columns along the forms grid where you have the form number, form name, update date, and that kind of thing. That's the kind of information that's in your prod header table. So it's basically for each form, it's the header information about the form. And you can see the folder info and prod header tables, they link up, but the names of the fields are different. It's a folder key in the folder info table, and for strange reasons, it's contact key in the prod header table. Okay. Your actual form, the actual data from the forms are stored in several tables. Each table name has the format of the name of the form _ group. So you might have crash _ unit, crash _ witness. And you can see that's linked to the prod header through the prod key column. And then you'll see there's a multi-key. That's to ensure uniqueness where you have, say in the unit where you have 3 units, so you'll have 001 for the 1 unit, 002 for another, 003 for the 3rd unit. I want to be careful, that is not the unit number as is shown on the form. If you want the unit number, it's going to be the sequence number field for the unit rather than the multi-key. The multi-key is an internal key. It just happens to a lot of times to look like the unit number, but stick with the sequence number, you'll be happier. Okay, so any data on the form, you're going to find an equivalent table with the table named form name underscore group name. That's almost true. Any data that's vehicle, individual, or location, that data is shared across forms. So we don't store that data in the form. We store those in what we call the common info tables. And here's the common info table for individuals. And you can see the key on there is called call key. And that links up here in individual call, in the form itself under individual call key. Now the truth is, on a form you might have several different types of individuals. You might have the driver and the witness. And each of those need their own separate call key link in the form. So what you're going to find is that instead of being called individual call key, it might be called witness call key, or on the citation, defendant call key. But it's serving the same purpose, and it hooks up to the individuals table. Okay, and there's the individual data for the driver. So that's the type of information you would see in the individuals table. And then you notice that next door to the individuals table, we have the individuals to form map. That's your master index. And the purpose of that table is to figure out, in the individuals table, you might have the same individual listed multiple times. So what the individuals to form map does is not only does it connect it back up to the form tables, it also clumps up those individuals so you can figure out that John Smith, the first instance of John Smith, third instance of John Smith, that they're all the same John Smith. And so that's what your individuals to form map table is doing. And very similarly, and so if you're in the master index and you see the linkage with the form to the person, here, let's see if I can get a little bit bigger picture of that. You see the form and the persons are linking up. That's all coming out of that form, individual form map table. And we got a similar thing going on then with the location, and going into the location table. Vehicles, again, we've got the master index and the vehicles table. So there's the vehicles information, there's the master index for it, and the last one is the carriers. So same concept there. So that's a very brief rundown of how your TRACS data is structured. This presentation will be available for you to download in case you want to go through these slides a little slower than we did. But if you're ever tasked with writing reports outside of TRACS, knowing a little bit about this is very, very helpful. Okay, so we have made some changes to the TLT. Most of the changes are really, they're not stuff you're going to notice, except that it's doing a better job of locating the from at. Earlier today, Darlene showed you the new radius search for private property parking lot. That you will notice. I wanted to give you a little heads up on a utility that is available to you as TRACS administrators called Regenerate Maps. If you're in the Configuration Manager and you go into the Utilities tab and click Regenerate Map, what that will do for you is it will clean out the cached version of the map. TRACS will do different projections of the map, and those projections are stored in the cache for reuse so that the map is more responsive. If you ever run into somebody who has kind of a map that's just looking weird and you don't understand why, come in here and do that Regenerate Maps, and that'll probably clean up the problem. To be honest, I haven't heard of anybody on the help desk calling in with this issue, but it is a utility that is available to you to use. So I thought I'd just point that out today. Okay, and web services. How many agencies here are on web services? Got one. Okay. This was covered yesterday and in the previous hour, so I'm going to go through really fast. Bottom line, web services eliminates end shifting, gives you access to the tracks forms from the squad car and access to the master index. It can run in disconnected mode, so if your connectivity goes down, they can still write citations. Agencies that have gone to web services love it. They never go back. It's just administratively less work. That said, you do need to come in with the correct skill set. You need to know how to set up an IIS server. You need to know how to administer SQL Server because you don't want to be running a web application on top of MS Access. That's just a recipe for disaster. So you need the correct skill set. It's available now. We've got close to 50 agencies on it. If you have what it takes to administer an IIS server, you should take a serious look at web services. And there's the little cloud picture. So basically, it's just a different client that installs on the squad car. And then up in your agency, you're going to have an IIS server set up, and you're going to have SQL Server set up. And then you're going to continue to have your Office machines configured as Office machines. And the Office machines go directly to your SQL Server database. For the squad cars, they go through the IIS server that handle the transactions, and then the IIS server talks to SQL Server to put the data in the database. And that's it for the prepared material. Otherwise, I'm prepared to answer any questions that you may have. If you're exhausted after a long day, I won't be offended if you choose to leave. Before you go home, though, please stop by the registration desk and drop off your name tag. We recycle those year to year. So if anybody has any questions, please speak up now.
Yeah.
Sure.
So my predecessor, how he set up our user IDs, he set them up by badge number.
Okay.
Yesterday you said never delete a user. We're basically recycling them when we get new officers. Should I switch them over to like first name, last name?
You're going to have to come up with some sort of primary user ID that is unique.
Okay.
I would leave the pre-existing ones alone because that's how those forms were created, is under those. So, you know, if you want to put like a -2, 3, anything to make it unique, if you want to put their last name after the badge number or before the badge number, that could work as well. Although if you have a last name like Schmidt, you might run into some bad luck there too, I don't know. Yeah, just the key is make it unique and don't delete pre-existing users.
Should I change the ones that we have currently now?
I wouldn't. I would say those are the ones that won. When the badge number gets reissued, then make sure that new user ID that you set up is unique with whatever system you want to use.
Is that going to affect old forms though? Because some of them have already been recycled.
Okay. Yeah. I do know what you mean. So essentially, if you create a new user ID so that you have something that's unique, the situation you're going to have is that essentially you're treating that officer as a brand new officer.
Yeah.
So he's not going to have access to his old forms, which probably will frustrate him. So your choice is to leave it alone. And the downside of that is he's going to have access to his forms and the predecessor who had that badge previously. Is that something that is not good for your agency? That's going to be something for you to decide. You may decide to live with it and just go forward doing a better practice.
Okay.
Yeah.
That answers.
Question in the back, please.
Not a question, but what we did for that when we started was we used their employee ID number as their primary because that number will never ever get duplicated ever in the area you're in because their employee number follows just one person forever.
Right.
Rather than using the badge number which can be duplicated with another officer.
Okay. And what he said was, that an employee ID number is a great choice for a primary user ID. Any sort of number that assures uniqueness is a great choice. I love employee ID because somebody's already figured out the uniqueness issue on that. Badge number, again, as we've learned, not such a great choice. Question, sir?
With LCs, one issue we come across, I've been told I can't be done by all something in the violations, our municipality had adopted the higher fine. Like the operator while suspended, it's 124 according to the bond book.
Mm-hmm.
But we adopted 313 because we had a huge issue with people just driving unsuspended without licenses. Is there any way of changing that amount so that the officer?
Okay, if you're talking about the traffic citation, and with OWI you are, the amounts in the traffic citation correspond to the published bond book, and by statute, that's what you're supposed to be using. So you either got to cite them for something else, or you got to convince the court committee that they're wrong and that they need to update the bond book. Because that's just what the law is.
We personally had it go through, but we have officers that are going through their.
Right, and we do allow officers to manually change the bond amount. That's correct. And the reason for that is we understand that sometimes we're late in getting violation updates out to you, and so that's a safety valve. And the purpose of that is so that you can put in the correct amount per the published schedule. Because again, sometimes the laws change faster, or the amounts change faster than we can keep up with. If you need the statute that says you must use the amount in the bond book, we can get that statute number to you. I don't have it off the top of my head.
Our city attorney American check this sort of state was something I would expect local municipalities to do.
Well, I know, but as a state agency, we have to follow state law, so that's where we're stuck.
What I'm saying is like kind of with the NTCs, because we enter into our.
Yeah. And with the NTC, you have more flexibility. And in fact, if you go into the violation shortcuts and create a shortcut, you can actually put your bond amount in for the NTC form. But again, for the traffic form, and I'll say this also for the DNR form, by state statute, the bond amounts are prescribed by this published schedule. And that's what we have to use. And yeah.
I just didn't know if there's a way on it that we're able to adjust. Not without hacking the system, and we're not going to help you do that. So, yeah. And of course, if you find that we are out of sync with the published schedule, we will try to correct that as soon as possible. You know, like I said, we have to follow what's in the statutes. If you've got other statutes that say something different, I can take that back to folks to have them review. But, you know, as I understand it, we have to go by the published schedule that's set by the state court committee. Okay. Did we ever return your laser pointer? No, right. I'm sorry, I can't see back that far enough. Yeah, go ahead.
Question for you. On the crash form, when somebody's sent to the hospital, there's a drop-down list there that gives you hospital names.
Mm-hmm.
Well, our hospital merged with our clinic and they made a new name.
Okay.
How do you change that name there? I can't figure it out.
Right, and that's something that right now is controlled at the state level. Rightly or wrongly, it is. And for that, I don't think there's a statute behind it. But what you want to do is, when that occurs, you can send a heads-up note to Badger's Tracks saying that this occurred. That table comes from Division of Health and Human Services. I hope I got all those initials right. And they give us the table and we put that into Tracks. But if you let us know, we'll talk to the owner of the crash form and have them work with DHS to get the new table, and we'll get that into a release.
Just send you an email.
Yeah, send us an short answer, send us an email. Longer answer, we'll get it. It'll probably take us about 2 months to get that into a patch. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes. Yes, there are published instructions on how to transition to web services. Just request the Convert to Web Services FAQ, and we'll send that out to you immediately.
It's about 20 pages long. If you've got some basic IIS skills, it's not bad at all. So it's pretty straightforward. Okay, any other questions? Okay, if not, I'm heading over to the main room where it'll be a free-for-all and we'll take more questions from other people. Thank you for attending.